Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We're super excited to be here and talk to you about such an important topic, which is the customer success strategy and operations. Like, you can't really do operations or strategy without one another. We have such a great panel today. Chris Singh, Andres Heckman, and Peter Armali.
Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone, subscribe to our YouTube channel for all the great videos that we produce on customer success.
Why do customer success teams need a customer success operations, and why is it so important to invest? And here's my take on it. Gaines, I did a customer success operations summit back in 2016. I really love this presentation, this slide that just says, look, investing in operations really helps you in a number of ways. It helps identify customers that are at risks really early, who can be an advocate for you if you're using, for example, the NPS survey data, and really analyze customers' behaviors and their satisfaction, and also harvest the data and analyze it to identify opportunities for expansions quickly. You're doing all of these things consistently and have a team that's dedicated to that. The premise is that there's going to be a financial impact that's much, much faster on renewal rates, on your growth, the ability to increase upsell and cross-sell. To the panel, have you seen what other immediate versus long-term impacts that customer success organizations have? And I ask that because I know all of you work with very large enterprise companies, but you also do some mentoring and you're helping various smaller organizations as well. What are some of the impacts you have seen, both short-term and long-term, by having companies invest in customer success?
I see customer success operations as being the indispensable kind of group, because they allow a company to scale its customer success practice in a way that allows the company to introduce the idea of reducing risk. Because if you think of customer success as kind of still a relatively immature business practice in general, I think executives are looking for customer success to prove its value, and proof comes through data, and proof comes through predictability, and proof comes through measurement. And without an operations team in place, I think those things are all missing. You have to have those things in place to really give the confidence to the rest of the company to say, we are a professional organization. We're going to run professionally. We have the metrics to prove it. And then we deserve the investment that you're going to make in us going forward. I think it's all about professionalism.
I agree with Peter. I would say moving away from guesses and stories and hypotheses to really numbers in terms of making decisions, defining your priorities. Before that, the strongest voice always wins. Moving to that data-based decisions just brings you a lot more efficiencies in the long run.
Yeah, and ultimately, all of those things that both Peter and Andres have spoken about must come back as a benefit to customers. Why should there be a benefit? If you do things inconsistently, I run a global business, I have lots of industries in those business. The last thing you need is your customers to feel that you have one company and different experiences. You try to get that singularity. So for me, the benefits is consistency. You can get a lot more prescriptive in the guidance you're giving customers. You can have much more predictable financial outcomes. For me, if I don't get the data insight to allow me to make business decisions that are clean and clear, then I'm flying in the dark, and I could make a decision that could be absolutely the wrong one. The other thing we probably should think about is, how do we make the CSM, who is the orchestrator of the customer, and at the center of everything, more efficient? And this gives that efficiency to the CSMs, which now parlays itself into an enhanced benefit to the customers, because everything should pull itself back. What's in it for the customers? And once you satisfy that equation, the financial part will be taken care of.
For the people who are hearing us, they might not have a fully mature CS operations. I kind of wanted to share what are the responsibilities of customer success. First of all, CS ops, they're fairly involved in any kind of launch of new initiatives. If you think about the process of launching a new initiative, you need to strategize, design, launch, and then see the benefit, capture it, and then maintain it, you could see how the CS Ops team is involved in almost every step of the way. Another way to look at it is that VP of Customer Success or the management or the board of directors dream about the strategy or the go-to strategy of the company or things that they want to see the customer success team evolve to. And those are typically supported by things that the customer success operations team support, from analysis to scaling to producing one-to-many programs to actual enablement that helps the customer success team scale up and learn new processes faster. And so with that in mind, are there any other things that you see typically that the customer success operations team have typically, and how does that look like in your organization? Is this a good representation of what's going on in Oracle, at SAP, and in Blackbaud?
For me personally, I'm taking a hard look at 3 pillars, if you will: revenue, customer experience, and products. And how can we build repeatable processes in there and make sure we're leveraging the right sets of insight in those 3 quadrants. And everything in those 3 touches on exactly what you have presented.
I think I would just add the voice of the customer in there too. A formal program that pays really close attention to the various channels that customer success needs to engage in with its customers and collect the data and use that to fuel innovation and actions that CSMs need to take, but actually fuel for the operations team to figure out how to refine processes and come up with new ways to help with the strategizing with the leadership.
One point maybe that adds a little bit on top of what Peter just said is also how to measure the experience. Basically, we really have very, very detailed strategy on implementing sensors all the way in the entire experience, how we measure it and how it flows back into operations.
Yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about specific deliverables that customer success operations team typically is responsible. What do you think about this list? Does this sort of like comprehensively includes almost everything you've seen, or do you think something is missing? What is, from your perspective?
I would say just adding where I just stopped, right? If I look at the first segment here with the customer analytics, what we are clearly enhancing beyond what you've listed there. I want a lot more data in my customer analytics about the experiences I create. And there is a lot of experiences. So the way we define this is every major experience is broken down into micro experiences: use of a product, use of a service, an interaction to get help, interaction with CSM, and so on, broken down in micro experiences. And then we are measuring micro feedback along the way. Once we have that complete and it flows into that, I have a telemetry that tells me how every customer is feeling about every aspect and every step of every aspect of the experience we are creating. And we are hopeful that, enhancing that with AI function, that we can move our customer interactions to a whole new level with that.
So maybe touching on the 3 quadrants I spoke about: revenue, customer experience, and product. If you look at revenues, cost of acquiring customers, it's always pressing. You need to understand that. And is it really expensive? And how do you lower that cost? Lifetime value, definitely I need to see insight on that. NDR, I need to see what we're doing, what we're retaining as a dollar value. At-risk customers, especially in that quadrant, I need to understand it. Customer experience, we would do NPS score, like Andreas just said, CSAT, and customer effort scores. And then for product, we would look hard and hone in on usage and consumption of knowledge and measuring those every single time a customer has moments that matters, or a just-in-time model when you're digital. We are querying and interrogating who's using what, when, so we can get insight for investment purposes, because I need to understand also what's long-tailed, what's really impactful for customer. In those spaces that I've mentioned, those are the kinds of attributes I look for.
When you think about all these different deliverables that your customer success ops team needs to provide, what are the skills that you're looking for when you're hired for CS Ops?
For me, data, right? You don't understand data science. And understanding the business side too, because too often we get consumed with the data without understanding the purpose, and then it becomes a problem. But I would say people who are tenacious but have really good data analytics skills, understands the customer success journey, are the types of people I'm after, especially analytic-minded people.
I think the only thing missing was communications. I think there needs to be, within operations, kind of the ownership of the overall communications framework for how CSMs are informed about new developments, new training, new tools, new processes, all that stuff needs to be professionally handled. And I think operations is the right area.
Acknowledging that maybe some of our audience may also be smaller companies, there's always this moment where you say, when do you start? Who builds this ops team, or the first 2-3 employees and so on? And it's always a trade-off. So a very pragmatic way to go about this, if you don't have a generous budget to draw from the beginning, may very well be that you are getting in your CSM team 1 or 2 people that really bring an operational background, data analytics background, and grow it from there. That's something that we did at a very early stage. It gives you the advantage also that you not just have an analytical person, but an analytical person that has insights and understands the customer success business from the start. So it makes for a lot easier conversations. That's what I know many smaller companies have done to build out, go that first step.
Another way that I've seen is not just only have like one of the CSM that has multiple skills, sort of do a hybrid role, but sometimes I see customer success teams borrow from other teams. Where do you think CS Ops actually reside, and should they also, because they have these skill set, actually provide support to other teams, such as customer support, for example, that all reports under the CCO?
We're actually doing some of that now. We're approaching the entire post-sales experience. It's kind of a seamless kind of experience for the customer. And that's forcing us to look at the way we interact with our peer organizations, and not just on the sales side, but I'm just talking about post-sales. So we are working a lot closer to make sure that we're kind of exchanging not just data, but understanding the various processes and figuring out, are there ways we can weave these together to kind of mimic the customer's journey on the post-sales side. And the intention is obviously to reduce friction, to produce faster responses, better information, better guidance. And at the same time, each organization is learning from each other. And I think that's really powerful.
Very subjective answer on that one, clearly from my side, would be I would not put it as part of CRO ops or sales ops or something like that from the get-go. There has to be extremely close collaboration between these teams, but I wouldn't make it part of that team. Now, the tricky part with my answer, that's why I say it's a little bit subjective, is as we are looking at what customer success management becomes actually throughout the generations, and at some point in time the entire company actually needs to be a customer success organization. The question is, how does that widen? How do you keep it separate still, and so on? But for to start building this out, my recommendation would be not to just make it a group inside a larger CRO ops or so.
Tell you where we should never put it, maybe a little bit controversial. IT is definitely, for me, not a destination where this should go. Clearly, that's not where it should go. I do think chief customer officer is where I would definitely tap to say, look, let's start there. But to Andres' point, if it becomes pervasive, you would have to think about maybe expanding, but I would put it at the CCO. I would also maybe have a little bit of a different opinion in the sense that you share up to the point at which it does not become dilutive or influenced, because statistically you can make numbers do anything you want. So you also have to be careful that the numbers that are being reported is as is, unvarnished and real and truthful. And you also have to be careful who's trying to influence what. So I think sometimes you may have to be very conscious of where certain kinds of data stores are coming from. That's why I would say consolidate and keep in the CCO area.
Not only does it supposed to be reporting to either the CRO or IT, should it be decentralized? We talked about needing different people with different skills. What are some of the benefits or detractors from actually have not a CS Ops team, but sort of like source the team from different functions within the organization?
It should be under one team for now. I feel like we're still early stage. I think Andreas had an excellent point, which is that eventually the whole company is going to be customer success, and that's absolutely true. And I think we've got some ways to go around adoption of advanced technologies and kind of cultural change within companies to make that happen. And for now, I think it makes sense to have a single place right now to refine the practice, to get really great at it, prove the results, to Chris's point about making sure you're delivering on those really financial metrics that are critically important. And if you can't do that, then it doesn't make sense to kind of dilute it by spreading it around.
Yeah, if you look at the CSM experience, everything we're doing here, it's almost like a focal point and convergence, because the CSM is going to consume everything that's being done. to orchestrate for the customers. I think that fluidity in that exchange and the dependencies that are so much linked, I think you need to centralize it and you need to keep it as a unit. Keeping in mind that a lot of the data will come from product and engineering. That's why I'm saying also that we need to instill not only in the selling motion customer success, but right from the first line of code any new company is trying to create, customer success should be embedded in there to realize that people will require data. So start writing code with customer success in mind. But I firmly believe it belongs central in a single team.
Let's talk about when is the right time to actually create or hire the first CS ops person. Should we wait until there's like at least 15 customer success managers? Is there like a ratio that we're looking to achieve? What are your thoughts?
I think when the CSM team meetings get more and more, higher percentage of time, it's like, do you actually know how often we do that? And have you heard that as well? And how many times did you see that? The share of time having such questions goes over 5 or 10% of the meeting time. I think that's the right point in time to start thinking about having CS operations.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's early. If you truly believe in data-driven, customer-centric model, then if you're an executive, you should start thinking about getting that person really on board early, because you want to establish the processes, not necessarily right out of the gate, because you actually have to have some proof that what you're doing makes sense, and you have the small team kind of working together, and you share best practices and your experiences. But not too long, maybe right even then, you'd want the operations person to be the one kind of consolidating the way this thing should work and start documenting, and then you just refine it from there. So I wouldn't say it relates to X number of CSMs. Like, you don't want to wait till there's 50 CSMs. It's more about like the size of your business, almost how busy it is. Like, what's your projections? Are you confident that your sales are on the right trajectory? And you better do it now, otherwise you're going to wait too long and everyone's going to start frustrating the customers through inconsistent experiences. And so I think you really need to establish operations very seriously early in the life cycle.
What do you think about the right time to start establishing a CS ops team?
I think Peter said it well. And as I just said, I think when the questions about quantifications come up, when the team starts to feel that we should measure this, and when the CSMs themselves start to pull more and more numbers and trying to get that together, quantifying that, that's the right moment to start. And I would also recommend do it rather sooner than later. And that's why I said maybe you can just hire the right profile into CSM where you have that analytical profile and grow from that nucleus, so to say. I don't think you can be much too early with that.
How do we know how many should we ask the budget for? I know there's going to be some customer success executives in the audience today. As they're asking for the budget for customer success operations, how many should they ask for? How do we know? Is it based on the skills that we need? Is it based on whether or not we have that skill set already in the team? How do you justify the budget?
You just kind of touched on it. What are the skills required based on the capabilities of the team? So what are you expecting the team to do? Is it going to be, designing the processes and maintaining the processes, the playbooks? Is it just kind of that stuff? Or is it broader than that? Is it going to be enablement? Is it going to be communications like I talked about with the framework or the voice of all that stuff? It's pretty rich. It's a rich portfolio for when a sophisticated operations practice is in place. And so that's kind of dictates how many people you need. But if you only have a smaller kind of team and you really just need someone to focus on building the right playbooks, you could probably get away with one ops person for like 20 CSMs. But as soon as that role starts taking on more responsibility, you're going to have to quickly kind of expand it. So I would say 3 for like 50 CSMs or even 100 CSMs. If they establish the right basis for processes, that should introduce enough efficiencies for the CSMs to operate well based on the right dashboards and the right kind of tools. They can do their job and serve a lot of clients without a large ops team. But if you expect them to do more, and most companies do, then you should probably budget for more than 3. I think we've got about 8, but we've got 300 CSMs too, and a lot of customers.
Is it really about how many customer success managers you have on the team? Or I wonder if it's about how many things do you want the customer success operations team to do, the type of skills, the type of programs, the number of analytics that you're going to have them process, and the cadence? Or is it maybe related to the number of customers you have? Because the more customers, the more data? Or is it relates to the data. What do you think?
If you look at Peter and myself, like Oracle and SAP, both our companies have a lot of different products. There is a dimension of, like in our case, CS Ops goes even, say, have their foot into content and infrastructure that the CSMs will use. And of course, that multiplies by the number of products and releases and your on-prem and your cloud, and it multiplies very fast. If it's really only down in doing some telemetry and some numbers, you may get away with 1 to 20, maybe 1 to 25, but it may be 10 times as much if you have the team do a lot of the actual services, content, filling infrastructure, and so on, automation tasks probably for the CSMs.
I don't see it as being CSM ratio. If you have a ratio of 1 ops person for 50 CSMs or 3 for 100, that ratio is going to get broken pretty quickly, or should be broken pretty quickly, if they establish the right kind of processes and the right tooling, the right environment for the CSMs to really scale. You would expect that number to kind of stay like 3 as the CSMs rose, or I would rather look at the size of the business. As the business is growing, how large should the ops team? And as you said, Arit, what are the expectations of the ops team? Are they expected to do all these things or just a small subset of these things?
If you like the slides and you want to assess what is the maturity of your customer success operations team, go ahead and text CS operations to number 480-418-1411. If you need help in setting up the customer success operations or maturing it, connect with me. We work with a lot of different companies to mature their customer success strategy and operations. We'd love to discuss with you what kind of offerings we have.